Hey everyone, I'm so glad you're here. Please like and subscribe to the channel to give me more motivation to tell more interesting stories. Now, let's begin. You're carrying a suitcase that feels heavier than it should. It's not the clothes, it's the knowing, the weight of goodbye. Outside, the summer streets of Amsterdam look deceptively ordinary. Bicycles lean against railings. Someone whistles. A breeze nudges the curtain of your old bedroom for the last time, and you don't wave to it. The world is changing faster than your legs can carry you. You're 13, and your country, your neighborhood, your very name are becoming dangerous. You are Anne Frank, and today you disappear. You follow your father through the back office of his company. The front door is a lie. The side stairs lead to the truth. Your shoes barely make a sound as you climb, holding your breath, even though no one's chasing you. Not yet. Then you reach the bookcase. It looks like nothing, just shelves. But it swings open, and behind it, your new universe. A few rooms narrow and dark, smelling faintly of glue and dust and something old. The secret annex. Historians still argue whether Otto Frank planned the timing of the family's disappearance or was forced by a sudden tip-off. What's clear is that your family had a plan, and now you're living inside it, step by careful step. You walk into the space that will hold your childhood and your coming of age all at once. You see a bed against the wall, some linens, a desk with nothing on it yet. But you already know what belongs there. You pull the red-checked diary from your satchel and place it down. Kitty, your invisible best friend. You don't say anything to her yet, but you will. A quirky tidbit. You receive the diary for your 13th birthday just weeks before you go into hiding. You name it Kitty after a fictional friend in a series of books you once read. You're not just writing, you're talking. And somehow, that makes everything feel less impossible. You explore each room slowly. The Van Pels family will be joining you soon. For now, it's just your parents, your sister Margot, and the sound of your own heartbeat in your ears. You test a whisper in the empty air and hear it bounce off the walls too quickly. It's going to take time to learn how to be quiet. Dinner is strange. Everyone pretends it's normal carrots and potatoes and fear. Your father, Pim, keeps his voice soft and steady. Your mother arranges napkins like they're guests. Margot reads something silently. You doodle a cartoon in the margin of your diary, 4 heads around a table, one with crossed eyes. It's labeled, Me. The day ends in thick shadows. There's no bedtime routine. No toothbrush left in the bathroom sink. Just a basin and a cloth. You undress behind a wardrobe door and pretend it's privacy. You lay on your new bed covers, scratchy mattress, too short. The room creaks, like it remembers someone else. And then, in the dark, you whisper to Kitty. You tell her about the bookcase, the smell of the secret stairwell, the click the door made when it closed. You say you don't feel brave. You say you're scared you'll forget the sky. A plane passes overhead too fast, too loud. You freeze. Everyone does. Then silence returns, and no one speaks of the way their bodies jumped. You stare at the ceiling, or where the ceiling would be if it weren't pitch black. You think about school, your friends, your cat. You remember leaving your bicycle behind, how it stood, leaning on the wall, not knowing it had already been left. That's how most things end, not with a scream, but with a quiet you weren't ready for. You turn on your side and whisper into the pillow, "I miss the sun." Then I'll remember it for both of us, Kitty. You wake up to muffled footsteps and the scrape of a chair leg. The annex breathes in creaks and whispers. There's no bird song, just the subtle hum of people trying not to be heard. This is how morning arrives now, not with alarm clocks or sunlight through blinds, but with restraint. With tension stretched tight across wooden floorboards, you sit up slowly. Your bed creaks in protest, and you freeze. You forget for just a moment that you're not allowed to sound like a person. The rule book of survival is already writing itself. No shoes before 6 p.m. No toilet flushes during office hours. No laughter too sharp. No dropped spoons. Your mother hands you a piece of bread. It's dry but warm. She doesn't say much. She doesn't have to. Every word in this place costs something. You nibble at the bread and glance toward the window. The curtains are closed, of course. Light is a luxury and a risk. You pull back the edge just a little, just enough to see a sliver of sky. Gray. Flat. Unbothered by your hiding. Downstairs, you hear voices. Not the ones you know. These are the workers in the office below. You remember them, Mr. Kugler, Mr. Kleiman, and Miep. They don't know you're here, or rather they do, but they act like they don't. Like everyone's pretending for survival's sake. A mainstream historical fact. The secret annex was hidden behind Otto Frank's business premises at 263 Prinsengracht. The helpers who kept the families alive risked everything daily to provide food supplies and, when they could, news. Without them, you wouldn't have made it past the first week. You take out Kitty and begin writing. The words come fast. Dear Kitty, it's strange to write in a room I didn't know existed 3 days ago. You write about breakfast, the silence, the way your father's face looks older in this light. Margot joins you after a while. She's holding a small book. She doesn't talk much anymore. You envy her calm, her careful way of folding clothes, of existing. You're louder, always have been. But here loud is dangerous. So you learn to shrink your voice. The Van Pels arrive by midday. More people, more tension. Mr. and Mrs. Van Pels, you call them the Van Danes in your diary, and their son Peter. He's a little awkward, a little quiet. He doesn't look you in the eyes yet. You pretend not to notice. The space changes with them. It feels smaller now. The corners echo differently. Meal times are tighter, the toilet line longer. But there's laughter too, sometimes, nervous, tentative, like a match struck in a damp room. A quirky tidbit. The Van Pels brought their pet cat Mouski into hiding. You love animals, but you secretly think the cat is louder than all of you combined. Still, his purring becomes background music in the evenings. A heartbeat that isn't yours. By afternoon, you've settled into a strange rhythm. The workers downstairs leave by 5:30. Only then can you move freely if walking in stocking feet and whispering counts as free. You help wash dishes. You play cards. You write about the funny way Mr. Van Pels eats his food, like it might vanish if he's not quick. Historians still argue whether Anne's early diary entries were written with publishing in mind or purely as a private outlet. Later, she would revise her diary with the dream of it becoming a novel. But for now, she's just confiding in Kitty, confiding in you. Evening brings light whispers and cautious laughter. Someone tells a joke. You don't even remember the punchline, but everyone laughs too hard anyway. It feels good. It feels almost normal. And that's dangerous too. The toilet leaks. There's a discussion, soft tense, about who will fix it. Who might have flushed too loud? Who's using too much soap? You stay out of it. You're learning that in small spaces, silence can be kindness. Before bed, you write again. You tell Kitty about Peter, how he avoids eye contact, but feeds mushei like it's a sacred ritual. You write about your dreams, how you keep imagining the beach, the sound of waves, the smell of salt. You've never been much of a swimmer. Now, you'd trade your best dress for 1 minute in the sea. Night falls like a blanket too thin to keep out fear. You lie in bed staring at the ceiling. You count your breaths. You count the cracks in the plaster. You count the days you've been gone from the world. And then you write one more thing. In the dark, I'm not a girl hiding. I'm a girl growing wings. You wake to whisper arguments in the kitchen. It's about potatoes. Again, Mrs. Van Pels wants to slice them thinner. Your mother wants to stretch them further. Mr. Frank quietly suggests saving the peels. It's morning math by way of desperation. And the answer is always not enough. You roll over and stare at the ceiling, listening. Cramped living doesn't just bring you physically closer, it peels the varnish off people. You start to see them raw, unedited. The quirks that made them amusing in conversation now become habits that dig under your skin. The way someone chews, the sniffing, the sighing, the endless sighing. The annex becomes a stage, and you unwillingly are both actress and critic. Your father, Pim, is the steady one, calm, thoughtful. He listens more than he speaks. He makes you feel safe in ways even walls can't. He reads by the window most afternoons wearing glasses that always seem to slide down his nose. Sometimes you stare at him and think if there's a right way to survive, it's that. You wish you were more like him. Your mother, on the other hand, confuses you. She's all properness and posture. You clash in small daily ways. She wants you to be still. You want to burst. She tells you to be kind. You want to be honest. It's not that you don't love her, it's that you don't understand her. And in a place this small misunderstanding feels like betrayal. A quirky tidbit Anne once wrote in her diary that if she ever truly let out her feelings, the paper would catch fire. You imagine Kitty with little singe marks along the edges, emotion literally smoking off the page. Peter remains a shadow in the hallway. You pass each other with a nod, sometimes a muttered morning. He's taller than you expected, and quieter. You can't tell if he's shy-annoyed or simply enduring. He doesn't talk much, but you notice things, how he always feeds the cat. First, how he lingers near the attic stairs. Historians still argue whether Anne and Peter's relationship was as deep as the diary implies or exaggerated through adolescent perspective. But what is teenage infatuation, if not an earthquake inside a shoebox? At dinner, the Van Pels bicker openly. Mr. Van Pels complains about the portions, about the temperature, about the radio static. Mrs. Van Pels interrupts everyone and corrects your grammar even when you're not talking. You roll your eyes so hard they might detach. You write about it all in Kitty. How every day feels like a soup made from leftover nerves. How you wish for 1 hour alone. Not even outside, just away. Somewhere without breath sounds. Then there's Dussel. He arrives weeks later, an older man, a dentist, a friend of Miep's. He's supposed to be temporary, but temporary becomes permanent in a world made of waiting. You're told to share your room with him. It's the only logical arrangement, everyone says. You nod. You hate it. He's meticulous picky and believes you're a noisy distraction. You believe he breathes too loud. That's balance, right? A mainstream historical fact. Fritz Pfeffer, whom Anne calls Mr. Dussel in her diary, was a practicing dentist who left behind his fiancée to hide with the Franks. His presence made the annex feel even smaller. 7 people became 8, and silence became survival. You write about him in Kitty with biting clarity. His habits, his strictness, his refusal to admit he snores. You don't hate him, but in here, proximity changes affection. It turns warmth into friction. There's just no room to escape each other. At night, you lie in bed while he rustles, clears his throat, arranges and rearranges his pillow like it holds the solution to exile. You clutch your diary and whisper thoughts that don't have space anywhere else. One of them, if I ever leave this place, I'm going to walk until my legs fall off, and then I'm going to keep going. You stare at the ceiling, knowing every crack, every water stain, like constellations of a sky you no longer have access to. You close your eyes, and you dream not of escape, but of space. A wide-open kitchen, a field with no fences, a single minute with no one within arm's reach. You wake the next day to the same arguments, the same breath, the same potatoes. But at least Kitty always listens. Some mornings, you pretend the crack in the wall is a window. You trace it with your finger slowly, like you might find a world beyond it. Like if you press hard enough, the wood will dissolve and the sky will pour in. But it doesn't. Not today. You pull back the curtain just an inch. It's always the same inch, always the same sliver. The chestnut tree outside is losing its leaves now. One falls. You watch it tumble down like it has nothing to fear. Lucky leaf. Peter appears beside you without warning. You both freeze, then relax. He leans closer, watching the same tree. You glance at him from the corner of your eye. He doesn't speak, but his shoulders are less tense than usual. And just like that, he leaves. You take a breath and return to your notebook. Dear Kitty, you write Peter still doesn't know how to smile with his mouth, but I think he smiles with his shoulders. Your handwriting is neater than it used to be, more deliberate. You've had time to practice. You pause mid-sentence when your stomach growls. The hunger is constant now, a second heartbeat. Everything revolves around food. How much, when, where it came from, whether it still has flavor. You dream of butter, just butter. Nothing more extravagant. A quirky tidbit, Anne once imagined a luxurious meal with cream, strawberries, sugar, and a single slice of white bread with butter. To anyone else, that might seem quaint. To you, it sounds like a royal banquet. You help sort the dried beans that arrived yesterday. Your fingers work automatically separating the good ones from the crushed. The pile grows, then shrinks, then grows again. Like time, like hope. Later, you go to the attic. You've been sneaking up there when no one's looking, when the annex is heavy and airless. And you need to remember that outside still exists. You climb the narrow stairs, careful not to creak. You slip through the trap door and sit on a wooden crate by the window. This is the best seat in your universe. From here you can see rooftops and birds and chimneys that puff smoke like lazy giants. You stare at the clouds, trying to guess their shapes. You decide one looks like your friend lies. Another looks like your school bag. And then there's the sun. It catches you off guard today, how gold it is, how warm it feels even through dusty glass. You hold out your hand and let the light rest on your fingers. You write in your diary later that the sun is a faithful friend. You don't know it yet, but someday people will quote that line like scripture. A mainstream historical fact, Anne Frank's diary includes several passages about the attic window. Her references to the sky, to the tree, and to sunlight have become some of the most powerful symbols of hope in Holocaust literature. You hear your name downstairs dinner. You take one last look at the rooftops, then close the trapdoor behind you. At dinner, everyone is arguing again. Something about ration coupons and where the cheese went. You tune it out. You watch Peter instead. He rolls a pea across his plate like it's a tiny marble. You almost laugh. You don't. Afterward, you help wash dishes. Your mother thanks you. You nod but don't speak. Words are too scarce tonight. In your room, Mr. Dussel is reading medical journals like he's preparing to diagnose the floorboards. You sit at the small table and open Kitty. You write, "I look out the window, and I feel that nothing bad can ever happen so long as there are trees and sky and clouds. But then I hear the boots below, and I remember I'm still a prisoner. A prisoner with very good handwriting. You think about the Star of David that used to be stitched to your coat. You remember the day you took it off, not out of freedom, but to go into hiding. The irony stings even your escape was sewn shut with that star. Historians still debate how Anne's relationship with her Jewish identity evolved during hiding. Some entries show defiance and pride, others resentment. She wrestled with it because it wasn't just who she was. It was the reason she was hunted. You look at your reflection in the window. It's faint, barely there, like a ghost watching itself vanish. You close your diary for the night and rest your head on your arm, and in the quiet, you whisper one more line to Kitty. I don't hate the world, even though it's trying so hard to make me. You wake with a feeling in your chest like butterflies trapped in a bottle. Not fear, not quite. Something else. Something nervous and strange and possibly nice. Peter, you saw him again yesterday in the attic framed by the trap door like a thought you hadn't finished. He looked taller. Or maybe he just felt taller. He didn't say much. He rarely does. But he handed you a pencil you hadn't realized you'd dropped. And in that second, your fingers touched. You felt a spark. Now it's morning, and your pulse is still drumming with questions you can't put on paper yet. You go through the usual rhythm, a breakfast of thin slices and thinner smiles. A nod from your father. A remark from your mother that you file under. I'll deal with that in my diary later. Mr. Dussel fusses with his socks. Again. You make a mental note, write a satirical essay about that. But all you're really thinking about is when you'll get back to the attic. By late morning, you find a reason sorting potatoes, a bit of fresh air, maybe checking on Mooski. You slip upstairs, and there he is again. Peter. Standing by the window, arms crossed, staring at nothing. Or everything. You hesitate, then sit beside him. Neither of you speaks. And yet the silence feels full, not empty. A good silence, like the space between musical notes. You ask him what he's thinking. He shrugs. You tell him the clouds look like mashed turnips. That gets a laugh. A small one, but real. You write about it in Kitty that evening. Dear Kitty, I think Peter is like a book with the spine sealed shut. But maybe, just maybe, I'm starting to peel it open. A quirky tidbit Anne used to joke in her diary that Peter reminded her of a lazy tomcat, always curled up in corners avoiding people. But she also admitted that in the quiet moments he listened in ways others didn't. In the next few days, your time with him increases. You find excuses, bring up Moski's feeding schedule, or suggest checking the laundry lines. Anything that leads you back to the attic. He begins talking more. Small stories. His school. How he misses walking alone at night. How he thinks the world might never go back to normal. You ask what he's most afraid of. He says, forgetting how to talk to people. You say, I'm more afraid of forgetting how to be a person. He nods, like that makes perfect sense. A mainstream historical fact. Anne and Peter grew closer during the later months of hiding. In her diary, she documented their first kiss, their long attic talks, and the way their bond helped her cope with the suffocating isolation of the annex. That kiss, by the way, it happens on a cold evening. The window is foggy. You're both seated close, wrapped in the same worn blanket. You're talking about dreams, his to become a mechanic, yours to become a writer. He says your writing will survive everything. You almost cry. Then he kisses you, just once. Light, like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. You feel the warmth for hours afterward. You race back to Kitty and spill every word. But even in your joy, you're aware of something else pressing beneath it all. This won't last forever. The attic, the diary, even Peter. All of it feels like sand between your fingers. Historians still argue whether Anne and Peter's bond was truly romantic or simply born of necessity and proximity. But in the pages of her diary, it feels real. Tender. Human. You watch him now from across the dinner table. He catches your eye and almost smiles. Almost. You think even in a place built to erase joy, you found some. That night, your dreams are soft. They carry no boots, no sirens. Just open fields. And someone walking beside you, not too close, not too far. Just enough. You wake to the sound of a creaking stair, a kettle boiling, a cough. And for the first time in weeks, you rise without dread. Because even if the walls are closing in, your heart has found a window. It starts with a sound, a thump, quick and sharp, like something dropped downstairs. Maybe a crate. Maybe a shoe. Maybe something that means nothing at all. But in the secret annex, every sound means everything. You freeze, mid-step, spoon in hand, standing between the kitchen and the washroom. Across the room, your mother goes still. Your father lifts a finger to his lips. Peter is already edging toward the attic ladder. Mr. Van Pels mutters a curse under his breath. Deusel's hand twitches against the table like it wants to shush the air. Another thump, then silence. You place the spoon down, slowly, gently, as if it might explode. The walls, already paper thin, seem to disappear entirely. It feels like you're naked beneath the floorboards, the entire city, listening in on your breathing. You glance at Peter. He meets your eyes, and there's something wide and wordless in his look. No one dares whisper. You all just wait. Historians still argue whether it was a thief a delivery gone wrong, or simply a misstep that led to the sounds that day. But what's clear is this fear in hiding doesn't arrive with fanfare. It comes in subtle shifts, in the way a fork trembles, in how silence grows teeth. The creaking continues. Someone is downstairs, moving, rummaging. You can hear drawers. A chair scraped back. A few muttered curses, and then perhaps worst of all, laughter. Not the good kind. The careless kind. The kind that doesn't know 8 people are huddled above, holding their breath and praying to every god they've heard of. A quirky tidbit, Anne once joked that if burglars ever came, they'd take the radio and leave behind the potatoes, proving once and for all that even criminals had taste. But today, no one's laughing. You inch toward your father. His hand meets yours and gives a slight squeeze. It doesn't make you less scared, but it makes you less alone. Eventually, the sounds fade. Footsteps, a door, distant, fading silence. But no one speaks for another 5 minutes, just in case. Dinner is quieter than usual that night. Even quieter than usual for this place which is saying something. Everyone chews softly, swallows softly, pretends their heart isn't still pounding like a hammer in a locked drawer. You write in Kitty later that night, "Today, I learned that silence can scream louder than any siren, and that sometimes fear doesn't knock. It slips in through the cracks." You think about what it would be like if they found you. If the bookcase swung open, and instead of a quiet room with pencil marks on the wall, there were boots, guns, noise, the end, a mainstream historical fact. The secret annex remained undetected for over 2 years. Despite close calls and several burglaries in the warehouse below the Franks, and the others were able to remain hidden until their arrest in August 1944. You lie in bed, staring at the ceiling again. But tonight, it feels lower somehow. Like it's pressing down, trying to tell you something you don't want to hear. You reach under your pillow and find your diary, its cover now slightly bent at the corners, pages frayed from overuse. You run your fingers along the spine like it's a rosary. You whisper, "Kitty, if I disappear, promise me you'll remember everything." The floor groans. You freeze again, even though you know it's just someone moving in their sleep. Even fear becomes routine. You feel ridiculous, then terrified, then ridiculous again. You try to focus on other things. What will you write tomorrow? What would you do if you were free? Would Peter hold your hand? If the world came back, you drift in and out of sleep. Somewhere in the haze, you dream that you're walking through the front door of your old house again. Your shoes are polished, your diary is in your hand, and no one is looking over their shoulder. You wake to the smell of burned potatoes. Life continues, even when it almost doesn't. You don't feel hunger anymore, not in the way you used to. It's no longer a rumble in your stomach. It's an ache in your bones, a haze behind your eyes. It dulls you, hums in the background like a broken violin string. You learn to ignore it, like the creaks in the floor, like your mother's sighs, like the pages you've rewritten so many times they feel more real than your memories. Today, it's potato peels and a shriveled carrot split 8 ways. You pretend it's stew. You make jokes about gourmet chefs, and for 5 minutes, everyone at the table almost smiles. Almost. Peter makes a face, and you catch yourself laughing too loudly. Your mother frowns. Mr. Van Pels mutters. The moment collapses. but it was nice while it lasted. You write about it in Kitty after the plates are cleaned. Dear Kitty, hunger makes you strange. It eats not just your stomach, but your joy. It gnaws on your thoughts. But sometimes I still find pieces of laughter between the crumbs. A mainstream historical fact. In their final months in the annex, the occupants faced severe food shortages. Potatoes, cabbage, and old bread made up the bulk of meals. Meat became a myth. Vitamins were fantasy, and yet the diary remained hopeful, even amid starvation. You spend part of the afternoon rewriting old entries, not because they were bad, but because now you write with purpose. You're not just venting anymore. You're building a voice, a story, a version of yourself that might survive longer than your body. You even say it out loud once: I want to be a journalist. I want to be a writer. I want to matter. Peter hears you. He nods slowly. You already do. That makes your cheeks go red, not from embarrassment, from surprise. Because part of you wants to believe him. You sneak up to the attic to write. The light there is best. Soft, gold-tinted. The kind that forgives imperfections. You can still see the chestnut tree. Its branches are bare now, but it's still there. Still alive. Like you. You write faster today. Whole pages pour out. About Peter. About your mother. About the war. About the idea that being Jewish has made you stronger. Not cursed, not doomed, but sharpened. Historians still argue whether Anne's identity was shaped more by circumstance or by inner conviction. Some say her resilience was innate. Others claim it was the hiding that carved it into her. Either way, her words suggest someone fighting not just to survive, but to mean something. You write until your fingers cramp. Then more. You whisper the lines as you scribble them. They feel like spells, like protection, like rebellion. Then your pencil snaps. It's a small sound, a silly one, but it breaks the trance. Suddenly, the air in the attic feels heavier. You can hear Peter breathing just beneath the trapdoor. You can hear Mr. Van Pels pacing again. The world pushes its way back in. You don't panic. You just rest. Your hand brushes the curtain beside the attic window. A fine dust rises. You watch it drift in the light like ash. You think about fire, about what it would take to burn the whole city down, about how words, too, can catch flame. A quirky tidbit: Anne once wrote that paper is more patient than people. But she also feared that her words would never be read, that no one would care about the thoughts of a teenage girl trapped in a ceiling. You close Kitty for the day, pressing your hand against the cover like sealing a promise. Downstairs, Mr. Dussel is humming off-key. It's the only sound in the annex aside from a distant church bell and your own breathing. You try to imagine being outside again, not just walking down a street, but hearing real noise. Laughter, unfiltered by fear. Shoes clicking on sidewalks. A child screaming just to scream. And music. God, you miss music. Peter once said he remembered a symphony his father used to hum. You asked him to whistle it, and he tried, but it was jagged, forgotten. You both ended up laughing so hard the floor shook. Then you stopped frozen, because even joy is dangerous. You lie in bed later that night and try to hum something yourself. Not a song you know. Just a melody. Yours. And it comes out like this. One note for every name you still remember. One for each sunrise you didn't see. One for the friend who still haunts your dreams. You fall asleep mid-hum. And for once you don't dream of food. You dream of applause. You wake to the sound of your father coughing. It's nothing serious, just a dry rasp. But it slices the silence like a razor. Everyone notices. No one says anything. You stare at the ceiling, one hand on your diary, the other clenched beneath the blanket. Even in sleep, you're bracing. When you finally rise, you move quietly. Every step is rehearsed now. Each movement feels like a negotiation with the house itself. The walls creak if you lean too hard. The floorboards complain if you breathe in the wrong spot. Downstairs, the Van Pels are already arguing. Something about salt, something about sugar. But you don't tune in anymore. You've learned to filter background noise the way you'd tune out a ticking clock. Instead, you focus on what matters. Today, you're writing something different, something bigger, not just a diary entry, a statement, a mainstream historical fact. In March 1944, Anne heard a broadcast from the Dutch government in exile, encouraging civilians to document the Nazi occupation. She decided to rewrite her diary with the hope that it could be published after the war. Her tone shifted, her writing sharpened. You write like someone who's seen too much and still believes it matters. You write about freedom, about fear, about womanhood, about injustice. You write like someone who believes people are still good. You write like someone who doesn't yet know she'll never leave this attic. And even then, you keep writing. You pause, after one paragraph, your hand trembling slightly, and you whisper to Kitty, "If my words survive, maybe a part of me will too." Peter peeks in. He doesn't say anything, just leans on the doorframe with that half-thoughtful, half-lost look he always wears in the afternoons. You motion him in. He sits beside you, knees pulled to his chest. You hand him your notebook. He hesitates, then reads. He doesn't laugh. He doesn't smirk. He says, "You sound like someone who's lived 1,000 years. You reply, "Sometimes it feels like I have." A quirky tidbit, Anne once compared herself to a little bird with clipped wings. But she also wrote, "I can shake off everything as I write. My sorrows disappear. My courage is reborn." In that moment, something shifts between you and Peter. Not a spark, a bridge, a quiet understanding that doesn't need defining. You talk for hours about fear, about what kind of adults you'll be if you ever get to be adults. He wants to work with his hands. You want to shape the world with words. He says you're already doing that. You ask him what he misses most. He says the stars. You smile. You can still see them through the attic window. Not the same, he replies. They don't feel real anymore. You don't argue. You just write that down. Later that night, after the building has quieted and the pipes have grown their last, you return to Kitty. You write everything, every line, every fear, every fragile hope. You write, "I see the world as it might be." And I write because maybe someone else will see it too. Maybe someone will remember that a girl once believed in peace while the world was trying to tear itself apart. You pause, then underline that sentence twice. You tuck Kitty beneath your mattress and lie back. You whisper to the ceiling, "If they never open that bookcase, I'll still be real." And as the house settles and your breath evens, you believe it. For the first time in days, your dreams are quiet. Just words, floating, landing, staying. The radio crackles like it's trying to breathe. Everyone crowds around it, shoulders touching backs, hunched eyes wide. It's just past 6 p.m. The safest hour when the office below empties and the annex can stretch its legs. But tonight, no one moves. No one blinks. A voice, distant Dutch urgent, breaks through the static. News from the front. The Allies are advancing. Towns are falling back into freedom like dominoes tipped in reverse. Everyone leans in as if they might catch the victory before it arrives. Your father turns the dial slightly. The voice clears, and the words land like fireworks. The invasion has begun. D-Day, Normandy. A beat passes. Then your mother clutches your hand. Peter whispers something you can't hear. The Van Pels gasp in unison. Even Dussel lets out a breath that sounds almost like a laugh. You don't cry. Not yet. You just stare at the radio like it's a portal. Like if you close your eyes and listen hard enough, you might feel the boots of liberation marching across Europe. A mainstream historical fact. On June 6, 1944, Allied forces landed on the beaches of Normandy in a massive military operation known as D-Day. It marked the turning point in the war-igniting hope across occupied territories, including the secret annex. Dinner that night is quiet in a different way. Not fear silence, hope silence. The kind where no one dares speak in case it breaks the spell. You write to Kitty with trembling hands. Dear Kitty, the war might end. I don't know when. I don't know how. But today, it felt like someone opened a window I didn't know was sealed shut. You dream of parades, of sunlight on your face, of walking down a street lined with people who survived too. But in the days that follow, the tension doesn't vanish, it mutates, because waiting for freedom is its own kind of prison. A quirky tidbit, Anne once joked that if peace ever came, she'd faint from the noise. She imagined the honking cars, the laughing crowds, the sudden burst of music, like waking from a coma to find the world still there. You begin watching the sky differently, not just for beauty, but for signs. Planes buzz overhead more often now. Some days they pass without incident. Other days the city rattles from distant bombs. You write that the air has moods that even the clouds are anxious. Peter stops talking as much. You think maybe he's afraid to hope. Or maybe he's just tired of starting over in his mind. You ask him what he'd do first if the war ended tomorrow. He shrugs. Sleep in my own bed, alone. You smile. Not even a bakery visit first. He chuckles. Okay, fine. A whole loaf of bread, then bed. You both laugh, then grow quiet again. Historians still argue whether the annex residents were truly optimistic or simply clinging to whatever light they could find. But in your diary, hope is always there, flickering like a candle. No gust of history can fully snuff. You spend your days writing even more feverishly now. You revise older entries, sharpen phrases. You even start titling your chapters. You tell Kitty, if we get out, this will be my book, my gift to the world. And in your heart, you believe it. Your mother warns you not to get too excited. Your father gently reminds you that wars move slowly. But you're a spark in a dry field. Every page you write is a step toward the door. Every sentence a crack in the ceiling. You don't just want to survive. You want to be known. You want someone years from now to read your words and say, she mattered. That night, as the radio hums in the background and the world outside lurches toward something new, you write one final line. I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I'll be ready. Because even if the war forgets me, my words won't. It happens without warning. One morning, you wake to find the air heavier than usual. The annex feels still in the wrong way. Like a theater, where the final scene is about to begin, but no one knows their lines. Your father's voice is quiet as he reads the newspaper headlines Miep brought yesterday. The Allies are still advancing, but slower now. Cities are pushing back like exhausted lungs trying to inhale one last time. You want to believe, but something in your stomach won't settle. You write in Kitty, "Dear Kitty, there's a kind of waiting that doesn't feel like waiting. It feels like drowning in slow motion." Peter barely speaks anymore. You see him in the attic, standing by the window, watching the street like it might wave back. He hasn't smiled in days. Mooskie's gone missing. Maybe escaped, maybe not. No one says the word dead, but the silence around the cat is loud. A mainstream historical fact. On August 4th, 1944, after over 2 years in hiding, the secret annex was raided by the Gestapo. The betrayal's source has never been confirmed, and historians still debate whether it was a deliberate tip or simply a coincidence. The night before it happens, you feel something strange, not a sound, not a premonition, just something. You clutch Kitty harder than usual. You even leave it half open under your pillow. You whisper to the ceiling, "If tomorrow is the end, let someone find this." A quirky tidbit: Anne once rewrote large sections of her diary by hand editing herself, reshaping moments, trying to make it good enough to publish. Some pages were revised multiple times with different phrasing, more vivid description, deeper honesty. That final day arrives like any other. A creak on the stairs, a voice not one you know. Then boots, fast, loud, like thunder that's been held back for too long. Your father says your name sharply. He tells you to stay calm. But your body is already moving without you. Your hands grab Kitty. You tuck it behind the bookshelf. You try to breathe. Peter stands frozen beside you. His hand grabs yours. You hear your mother's sob. Dussel's stammer. Mr. Van Pels shouting something, God, maybe even praying. And then they're in the room. They don't say much. They don't have to. They wear uniforms. They point. They command. Your world ends in 10 minutes. No explosions. No dramatic music. Just absence. Absence of privacy. Absence of protection. Absence of time. You're allowed to bring one bag. You pack socks, a scarf, a notebook, but not the notebook. Kitty stays behind, tucked between floorboards and hope. They march you down the stairs like ghosts in reverse. Your last thought as you leave the secret annex: please, don't let this be all that's left of me. Historians later discovered Anne's diary thanks to Miep Gies, who found and preserved it after the arrest. She couldn't bring herself to read it. Instead, she waited, hoping that one day Anne would return to finish her story. You don't know that, of course. You only know that the light in the attic is gone, that Peter is beside you, that your father's hand is still on your shoulder, that Kitty is behind the wall, that you're walking away. The annex stands quiet now. Dust gathers where laughter once hovered. A breeze slips through the attic window, brushing the edge of a diary no hand will open again for months. The chestnut tree outside sheds its leaves without an audience. Time moves forward, like it always does, without asking permission. Kitty waits. Somewhere far away, a girl clutches her father's hand and tries not to cry, tries to remember what sunlight feels like on her bare arms, tries to keep hold of her name. In another world, one not yet rebuilt. Her words begin to echo. They travel from attic to page, from page to publisher, from publisher to the hands of a stranger who never knew Anne Frank, but reads her thoughts like prayers. The kind of prayers you don't need to believe in to be changed by. Because she wasn't just a diary. She was a window, a mirror, a warning, a wish. And in her own words, written in a moment of quiet amid a world at war, in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. Let that line rest with you now. Soft, lingering, like a voice in a hallway, like a candle in a storm. Because she never got to grow old, but her words did. And maybe that's enough to keep her alive. Thank you for listening to the story.